Dancers. My name is Kaylee. I'm the founder of Pivot for Dancers, and today we have an interview with Sakina Ibrahim. She's an NAACP Image Award nominee, a published author, professional dancer, dance teacher, social entrepreneur, lots of different things, and we had an awesome conversation that I'm excited to share with you. But before we get into it, make sure you subscribe, like this video if you found it interesting, and if you're looking for other dancer-specific career transition resources, inspiration, and a like-minded community to support you, please check out pivotfordancers.com. So without any further ado, let's get into the interview. Hi Sakina, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited to talk to you. I first want to start out with, as a professional dancer, what's sort of your background in dance, your sort of dancer resume? I kind of just like to start with that to kind of get a feel for what experiences you've had in the industry.
For sure. Thank you so much for having me, first of all. So I did my bachelor's in fine arts at the University of the Arts in Philadelphia. This is where I had the opportunity to work with so many dance legends, from Louis Johnson to Anthony Burrell, Ken Bailey of Philadelphia. From U Arts, I started dancing with Benny Harris, Pure Movement, which is what I call one of the first concert proscenium stage companies that really centers authentic hip hop culture in the theater. A lot of times you don't see hip hop origins, popping, locking, waving, house breaking in the concert theater, but Rennie does it. So
Amazing.
shout out, yes. So I danced in that company before going to graduate school at UC Irvine, where I did my MFA in dance. I worked with Donald McHale. I was one of his rehearsal assistants. So I stage master works such as Rainbow Around My Shoulder. One of his later works called Even as the River and the Sea Are One, Life and Death Are One, which was no coincidence because soon after he did transition. I have done a lot of work and hustle in New York. I worked for Dance Theater of Harlem, for Mark Morris Dance Center. I trained at BDC. I went to Bates and Jacob's Pillow. I was a scholarship kid at the Martha Graham School. So I had so much training. I'm a modern dance baby. I love modern dance. I always have loved modern dance and jazz dance. I did some commercial work, music videos with rappers, and I danced for Jill Scott and some of her videos. I worked with Troy Kirby. He's a part of the hi-hat camp. Hi-hats like the creme of the crop up there. I've done some musical theater as well and off-Broadway work while I was spending time in New York. I was Lisa Turtle in Bayside the musical. I don't know if you remember Bayside or how old you are.
I don't.
You don't? I don't know. So what was it? Saved by the Bell. Saved by the Bell. The
Okay.
school they went to was Bayside. So there was a musical called Bayside the Musical. And so I was Lisa Turtle in there, had a really great time. It was an interesting experience, the New York, dance theater, musical theater circle. You run into the same people, you hustle, you grind. It's the dead of winter and you got to get your leg up.
Right. Yeah. Waiting outside in the cold
Right.
for hours before you go in to be full out.
Yes, definitely. And now that I'm sharing all that, I definitely have to give all the agents a shout out too, because they work really hard to try to, place you in a situation where you can get some work. So throughout my career, my first agent was Trio. I think that was Rodney. He was in LA. Then I moved to Block, New York, LA. and now I'm with Carson Adler in New York. And so grateful, just grateful to, there's so many people who never even get the shot, to be represented, to be in the room, with top agents and casting directors. And I've been looked at for some really serious roles. I remember my first audition out of undergrad, I was being looked at for the lead in Bring It On with Andy Blankenbuehler. And
Yes.
yeah, that, what was that character's name? I forgot the lead girl's name. I forgot her role. But it was a long, 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 extensive process.
Mm,
And
mm.
just, you cannot sleep on how much hard work and dedication goes into putting up a production before, I think it was even being workshopped. It wasn't even going up yet, before it hits the stage. So I've been super fortunate, as a performer to have a lot of shots, to have a lot of opportunity to be seen and, to work as a dance educator, to always have that passion of teaching inside of me. I know some people do it because they have to. It's like the way you pay the bills, right? Your preschool kids. But I really always um, have loved teaching. I started teaching at 15 years old. Miss Carol gave me my first job because the hip hop teacher didn't show up that day and I was there. So
Oh, you just stepped in. That's
and so I
awesome.
just, yeah, I stepped in and that opened a career path for me. So I'm so grateful.
Yeah, I mean, clearly you seem very well rounded and have lots of fun stuff on your belt, under your belt. But I sort of want to know now, like, what has the journey been for you transitioning maybe away from more of the performance heavy career and into what you're doing now as an author, as a teacher? What did that journey sort of look like?
I realized that there, for me, there was a necessary transition, just based on kind of my expectations for my life. That glorified struggling artist role was not what I wanted. Even when I got to LA and you're auditioning and you book a music video and they're paying you $250, you're like, this isn't gonna cut it. And there's there's a lot that's happening now. I actually was just on Instagram and there was a young girl who was booked to dance for an artist, but they didn't send the contracts and she was advocating for herself and they cut her from the gig. And there's dancers make the art come forward and touch the people. If it wasn't that
Mm,
way, then we wouldn't have TikTok. These songs like,
mm,
Lose Control by Missy and Sierra and Lady Gaga and all these major pop, records. If we think about MJ, Janet Jackson, all these major artists, Beyonce, who did they put next to them? The best of the best dancers. And so after I'm like auditioning, and you looking at the call sheet, and you're like, even a good gig, it's like $2,000, and you're like, that's not even rent in LA. Like, what am I gonna do? So once I realized the real of the career path, I knew for me and for my expectations of my life and how I wanted to live, that there was going to need to be a widening and expanding of my work as an artist, of my work as a dancer and performer, and how I was going to do it. And that happened over time. The first transition was, you know, not getting that final role for Bring It On. And, after all the auditions and, decide, okay,
right.
new look for this audition, and what if I change my hair like that? All these things are costly, right? The bus back and forth to New York, all these things. um and teaching, and then saying to myself, well, this can't be it. And that first transition was, I talked to my department chair at UCI, at U Arts, and she said, well, you're really book smart, so maybe you want to think about taking the academic route. And that was the beginning of a transition, realizing that you can be a part of dance, you can still be a dancer, and that there's dance that exists in academia in this whole other world that's not commercial. And that is lucrative as well, you know, where you can make a living for yourself. So that was the first transition. And doing that research, my research was on dance and youth empowerment, and doing my research on how dance can be used as a way to culturally empower young people of color led me to writing my first book. So I learned the art and discipline and technique of writing in grad school. And, you know, I always say God just had a plan, because that led me to write my first book, which opened the way, you know, for what I'm doing now, you know, as a writer and social entrepreneur.
Yeah, it's always funny how those things sort of happen. You don't really realize it at the time, but it's sort of it 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 all leads to the next thing, and you can
Yeah.
build off of that, of what you're doing just based on what you're interested in and following
Yeah.
that. I find that that's quite a common thing. And maybe dancers, artists, you know, whatever you want to call it, we just know how to follow our, for lack of sounding corny, like follow our hearts, you know, like, and it kind of leads to these expansions. Like you said, I really love that you hit on that as well, because it is an expansion. You're not actually turning your back on anything. You're just expanding into
Mm,
some new parts of it, which I think is such an important thing for dancers to remember, because it's always this fearful thing, right? Of like, oh no, you know, I don't want to, like, I love dance. I don't want to turn my back on it or something. And it's like, well, it's not that. It's expanding yourself. Like, who are
yes.
you beyond this? And it can be
Yeah.
really quite powerful when you make that switch. Um, so you have 2 degrees in dance, right? Do you have any other certifications? Because that's a big question that comes up too, is do I need to go back and get a degree in order to make a transition? Do you what do you think about that?
I think it depends on who you are.
Hmm,
If you're not a school person, don't do it. Why
for
would you
sure.
torture yourself? Why would you torture yourself and spend the money? I'm a school person. I like to learn. I like to nerd out. I like to nerd out about in books about dance and art and culture. So it wasn't, you know, it didn't feel like work to me. It was fun. It was really like one of the sort of the best transitions ever, you know, I think that I could have made. Um, because I'm a school person. But if you don't like an institution, then maybe it's not going back to school, but it's getting a certification, or it's, you know, doing a masterclass series, or going to a conference to learn what it is that you need to learn, or signing up for a boot camp, or getting the right coaching and consulting to align, you know, to align with what your next move is going to be, so that you can get the tools and be able to move forward. The A lot of brilliant artists, I mean, from the Graham Company, I mean, even Anthony Burrell, you know, later on decided to go get their masters. For me, I knew I wanted to teach in academia, so it was like that's the move to make in order to qualify to, you know, teach dance with an emphasis on Black studies, which is what I do in a college, you know. So I think you have to really know what it is that you want to do. I also know people who went to school um, to do their masters in dance, and they did it to take a break. They did it as a
Hmm.
transition, you know, because really with the master's or a terminal degree, you can still kind of go into any field. You still have to hustle for your job. That's just, this is America. Like that's just part of,
Right.
that's
It's
just part
like
of, it's the nature of the beast, you know. Um, so I think that you have to know who you are. I think be smart with your resources and relationships. Like, you know, for a while I worked in the music industry administratively. You don't need to go to school, right? But it's like, what are your skills? Your time might be to go cultivate a skill. You know, maybe we need more accountants in the arts, right? So maybe you will
Right.
take your courses in accounting or in business management, or you know what I'm saying, to figure out what your next transition is. Also, a lot of dancers go into a wellness field, is very closely aligned, right? So they end up teaching yoga, or mindfulness, or become wellness coaches, that kind of thing. That's part of my business model as well. So, taking an integrative wellness class or something like that. But it depends on what you know. You have to know yourself. But that's a great question.
Yeah, it is so true. And I think, learning more about yourself is going to be the best, I guess, work you can put in to getting to that next thing, because it's so individual.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to talk about your new book as well, and how that sort of relates to. It sounds amazing. I mean, you obviously have a very um, powerful story to tell, and it seems like it's really interesting how your dance experience does really seem to translate. Anyway, like I just want to ask, you know, tell us about what sparked this new book. Um, and it's called To Begin for everyone. It's called To Begin. And yeah, just tell us about where that sort of came from, and if anything from your dance background sort of, or yeah, how it influenced it, how it yeah, how it changed maybe what the final book ended up being, if that makes sense.
So let me go back a little bit, because I mentioned going to grad school, writing the first book, and that kind of opened the way. So after I wrote the first book, Big Words to Little Me, Advice to the Younger Self, that was a workbook, focused on self-esteem, goal setting. That kind of let me know I had the niche for personal growth and development. Like it just came out of me, which I think is intuitive to what we do as artists, like what we do in the studio is constantly work on ourselves. As dance practitioners, that's what it is. You work on your technique, you work on your performance, you work on your look, you work, like that's our part of our job, is to work on ourselves so we can bring forth the art in a particular way. So it flowed kind of naturally. And then I got the Image Award nomination, which let me know, like, oh, this is definitely the way to walk. I have to trust what's going on here. Because when I tell you, I had no idea what I was doing, no idea what I was doing. So I literally was walking by faith. Um, and so I was doing workshops, I was like, hey, I have this book, I'm a dancer. So in my workshops, we dance, we move, we, talk about how we feel and interpret it through movement, which, unless you're a dancer and you grew up doing it, a lot of people are so disconnected from their bodies, you know?
Hmm.
And when you're surrounded and you grew up in the dance community, I know I didn't know. We like forget that the majority of people are not connected to their bodies. So that's like, that became a big part of the work. It's just like, and they're like, oh, this feels good, right? Like moving to music and not judging myself from it. Um, from there, I started, I was working for myself, hustling, and life started getting really rocky. I had a relationship that went through an extreme change when my partner at the time became paraplegic from an accident. I was his caregiver. I experienced my uncle passing away. I started to rekindle and uh, connect with my father, who was in prison, and start to heal those wounds. And I was just really going through some deep stuff internally, and I also really wanted to get through it because I knew that there was lessons in it, and I knew that each of those things that I mentioned, heartbreak in relationships, grief, and childhood trauma, are things that we all can relate to. So I lived through it and I danced through it. you know, I
Yep.
stretched and I prayed and I danced through it. That was my therapy, part of my therapy. And once I got to a place in my low of lows, I was like, okay, it's time to write. I started just feeling it intuitively, that my way through it was going to be to write through it as well. So I started writing to begin. And I just, shared these different lessons that I learned through the ups and downs of life that so many people go through and experience. We all know heartbreak to some capacity. Most of us have lost loved ones or people that have been close to us, especially within the last 2 years. Um, but my approach to life is, what is this trying to teach me? That's how I look at everything that I experience. So I wrote it all out, and the end of the book has these questions that I felt would have been helpful before I started going through the stuff. My favorite
Yeah.
question is the first one, which is, at what point did you betray yourself? And especially when it comes to heartbreak, right? A lot of the things that I experienced, even later on and going through a abusive relationship, it was like, now before it got here, what
Mm-hmm.
what happened and what showed you that you ignored? And that has been the biggest
Mm-hmm.
lesson, and something that I want women to know, is that we have some strong intuition, but so many times we let our minds talk ourselves out of what it is that we know that we know.
Oh man,
Yeah.
that is like hitting me. That is like so real, isn't it? That
Yeah,
is
yeah.
so good. Like
We
such a good
know.
question to ask. Yeah.
Yeah, we know. And a lot of times we turn to experts to help us filter through these things, but even in my own, healing journey and walk, talking to my therapist or my coach, whatever, it's like deep down you have the answer. Deep down, it's just a matter of learning to trust it, and learning,
Mm,
especially in relationships. Um, Something's trying to protect you. Something's trying to
mm-hmm.
protect you. Something's trying to guide you, and something's trying to teach you to trust yourself too. And I think that that's the lesson in it all. And so, to begin, is various experiences that I've had in life that were strong experiences, that were essentially leading me to learn to trust myself.
Wow. That's amazing. But I think,
That's
in my own experiences and in talking to, so like when talking to dancers who are going through this like identity crisis of something they've been doing since they were itty bitty, and then now they're all of a sudden like thrust, or they feel maybe pushed out, especially if they get injured, or it's just tough out there, you don't get the part, it's not happening in the way that you need it to, sort of, which happens to all of us. I think no matter how successful you are, it's like there's sort of an expiration date,
oh
sort
yeah.
of, but there's also like your priorities change and all of this stuff. And the more I talk to people about it, and when I talk to therapists and other, I guess, someone that's more of an expert than I am in like mental health or things like that, they always say it's like, well, you're grieving. It's a grieving process. It's a
Ooh,
loss. You know
yeah,
what I
that's
mean?
good.
And it's
Mhm.
like, oh, you're right. Like we're all sort of going through these different stages of grief. We're grieving our past selves. We're grieving,
Mhm.
maybe a community that we don't feel like we belong to anymore, or we're just grieving this like past life. And it
Mm,
is a relationship too. I think about that as well, where when I was coming out of it, I felt like a lot of bitterness and resentment, and like, oh, you know, it's like, oh, the 18-year-olds that are coming up are just like taking all the jobs or whatever, like all of this bitterness and whatever. It's like, but that's first of all, that doesn't matter. And second of all, it's like, it's it's grief, you know, it's you're grieving maybe your youth, or it's just like this massive, that was just a massive eye opener for me.
Yeah.
And even in, like, even still, you kind of get these waves of like, oh, hang on, who am I? Like, but do I even need this? And have I betrayed myself perhaps? Like, I haven't thought about it that way, but that's really interesting too. And like, I sort of knew that I should probably prepare for this because we know it's coming, right? But it still takes us by surprise. But yeah, I think getting to know yourself and all, and learning to trust yourself, I think is huge. Because I think we do sort of know what step to take, but we're just, when we're not listening to ourselves, we start to kind of feel that this push against something, and maybe that's where the bitterness comes from. But what I was
Mm.
getting at was that the bitterness, it was like, well, it's a relationship, right? And I was like, well, do I want to protect the relationship I have with dance, or am I trying to protect my resume?
Yeah, are you trying to protect like your ego about it,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
you said so many good things. I mean, the first thing that I love what you said about protecting the relationship, because especially we start this thing when we're kids, 2, 5, 7, and then you
Mm-hmm.
grow into an adult, you go into your professional career. The nature of the beast is disappointment and rejection.
Right.
That's just part of the nature of the beast. And I think a lot of people give up. And even when had started transitioning and started focusing more on like my business and how I was gonna use dance, our training is about other people. Our training is
Mm.
about being approved by casting, being approved by an agent, being approved by your headshot, being approved by your body size, being approved by your look. Really, it was a wake up call. I got to LA and they separated us by hair texture and skin complexion. I knew the commercial world wasn't a space for me because of what I fundamentally believe. I knew that I was out dancing a lot of the girls in the auditions and being cut. And then I was like, okay, this isn't about talent. You know what I
Right.
mean?
It's not about dance. Like, it's
This
literally
isn't
not
about
about
dance.
dance
It's
so
a
much of the
business.
time.
It's a
Yeah.
business. It's about our costume. We have a size 2, we have a size 8.
Yep.
Those are the those are the two sizes we're looking at. Or, how you might have the talent, but can do you are you demonstrating in the audition that you can work at a rigorous level to be up and on stage in 48 hours? There's so many different. Do you have a relationship with the choreographer or with any of the dancers? Whose name is on your resume? It really is a business. And I'm talking like I have followers on Instagram, so I book a job days. That I don't know anything about. I was out of it before that shit. Sorry, I don't know if I
Same.
can swear.
Yeah. Same. Yeah.
I don't know what. That's a whole different beast. So change deciding, I want to preserve this relationship with dance, but I'm gonna change it. And like somebody who inspires me so much is Kim Hale, because she's like, I'm not gonna be limited by my age or anything that's going on, my look. I'm going to develop and cultivate my own relationship with dance, and
Mhm.
not be limited by age. And there's a lot of older women who have done so, and who share their love of the art. I mean, I think about Miss McDonald too, who she's one of the ambassadors for Beyonce's campaign, Ivy Park, and is done like working commercially, and it's all gray hair. All
Yep.
like, and an elder, someone we would consider, an elder. My time working with Mr. McHale, who was in his 80s and had a relationship with dance. He wasn't signed to WME and choreographing with Disney anymore, but he still had a relationship. And so I think that we have to be okay transforming relationships, and also our dance careers not looking like everybody else's. Our dance careers not meaning the one commercial gig, because I just know so many people who do gig to gig to gig, And it's a tough lifestyle.
Mm.
It's a tough lifestyle. So you have to be okay ebbing and flowing, and again trusting yourself and what the journey is. And it's so frustrating. I mean, I quit so many times before our transition. Like
Yeah.
I quit. I'm done. I quit.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. And you have to adapt and you have to, yeah, go with the flow and ride the wave and yeah, trust that it's going to be okay. And yeah, I think that um even in your experiences, like in your life beyond dance, having, and again, we all go through kind of tough times, like that you need to know how how to handle that. And yeah, I don't know if our culture as a whole really helps us out. But I think that learning, because you can learn so much from your transition from dance, because it is such an identity thing and it can be so all encompassing. Is that a word? Like
Encompassing.
encompassing. Like, what am I trying to say? Um, it's pretty, you can learn a lot. And I like what you said too about like, what can I learn from this? What is this trying to teach me?
Yeah. You
And
mentioned something about dance, like the body transitioning. I remember
yeah,
when I always was very flexible, like never had to stretch, like could always drop in. And something happened to my hip, like teaching a jazz class, and I lost one of my splits, and it was very emotional. I
yeah,
cried. I grieved, like you said. I grieved. I
yeah,
called my best friend. We grew up dancing together, and I said, I can't do the splits anymore. And it hurts. So it hurts right here. And she's like, girl, we're older now. You know, you got to warm up.
exactly. Well, yeah, you've got to like, I mean, when you get to 30, 40, you're like, your body just hurts way, like you're not 18 anymore, and that's actually okay. It's going to be different. You got to figure out different ways to keep moving and keep, because the truth is you can, maybe not at a super high level, like you probably can't be doing like gram repertoire and like whatever else at a certain age. Like I could barely do that when I am 18. That's a hard, that's very difficult. Maybe you can't do that at a certain age, but like Kim Hale is a great example because she's still killing it. And it's like you can still go take class. Your body still can do it. It can move, and it's meant to move. We're meant to move, and you'll feel better and all of this stuff. It's like, but to me, it felt more important to not let that bitterness about the industry
Right.
take away my relationship with dance, right? It's like, well, what's more important?
Mm.
And I'm like, I need to actually protect this and figure out what's going on. Because so like I know so many dancers who are just bitter, like they don't dance anymore because they're bitter and because of these sort of negative emotions.
Mm.
Um, and I don't want to have so much negativity around something that is the best thing that could have ever happened to me. And like, we're all so lucky that we found it so young, and it's this amazing thing and amazing experiences you get to have. You live the dream, right? And that's good. And then you kind of move on to these other things, prioritize other things, maybe expand a bit. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, you got to keep moving and finding ways to make it work. Which sort of leads me to my, I guess, last question I wanted to, or topic I wanted to talk about is how, because I know as an educator, and you sort of touched on this, how you use dance as a modality for healing, as a resource. Yeah.
So I always say dance saved my life. There was a lot going on in my hometown and just in the community alone, underserved community in Massachusetts. Shout out Springfield. um, let alone family dynamics. And I had a safe place going to dance class. I had a safe place where my character was cultivated. I was held accountable for my experience in school, my academics. I was allowed to shine. I was allowed to make mistakes. I built really, really important relationships that are still important relationships. My high school dance teacher who had the company, and she paid for my trip to Miami so that I could get my first scholarship to Bates. You know what I'm saying? At 15 years old. And so I call her, I'm like, wow, I appreciate you so much. I'm an adult now, and I'm so glad I still have a relationship and a friendship with you. And that I learned in the dance studio that all the different pains that I was experiencing, most teenagers are going through something, right? But that all those different pains I was experiencing, I had a space on a Marley floor in a mirror to work through it, or to not have to think about it. And so I was part of the studio and the dance company and the chorus and the musical theater and and teaching and doing community service. I was a part of all these things that kept me on a path. It kept me on a path.
Mm.
It kept me away from drugs. It kept me away from getting pregnant young. It kept me, out of the hands of dangerous situations that are really out there disproportionately, for Black kids and for Hispanic kids as well. And so I also had an uncle who was disabled. And so everything I was learning about like movement and dance and contraction and initiating, like all these things, I would go and teach my uncle and like work with him. As a kid, I didn't know what I was doing. As a kid, I was just, you ever say, okay, dance with me. Okay, now take a deep breath. And then when you exhale, I want you to exhale all the way and then shift your hip. Oh, I'm like explaining all of these things, which are like body, mind censoring concepts before I had a language for it. Fast forward 10 years into grad school, where you learn about, BMC and Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen and this world of somatics and movement, right? So I knew intuitively that dance was healing. And later on through my education, I was able to discover this world of dance as a healing modality, a dance as a way of understanding the body. I've had clients who have had cerebral palsy and Down syndrome, and working with young people with disabilities is very important to me, because, like I said, my background, my upbringing, working with my uncle. So when clients started coming around who had MS, who had these different physical things going on, the approach I had because of the dance training was very different than what you're going to get in PT, right? In physical therapy, which is muscular, not neurological, not thinking about moving on a cellular level, which is like, I'm nerding out right now, which is,
No, me too. I'm like,
something you learn and release. You learn release the technique, not just about moving the muscles, but how do you move in from your neurological and your cellular system, and even just thinking about it, imagining it, and what that imagination does for people who legit like can't heel ball toe to walk, right?
mm.
In the language that we have as dancers, especially modern dance nerds, to lift the arch, spread the pinkies, like all these different things. So life taught me, and these beautiful souls, who have different abilities, coming into my life taught me that dance was a healing modality, and even if you don't have a disability, just moving the body, anything. I think Mr. McHale used to say, anything that's not moving is dead, you know.
It's true.
Older people do not care what
Yeah.
this
Like,
what it sounds like, and so you're like, okay, it's not moving, it's dead. So, but let's really think about it. If you're not moving in your digestive system, right, if your chakras are not moving, if you're not moving, What are you telling? You're telling your body slow down.
Mm.
You know, you're telling your body slow down. You have to keep the circulation and the movement going. And then I can think about spiritually, you know, just through our ancestry, you know, the African ancestry, the time I spent time in Ghana, studying Ghanaian dance. And it's dances of African diaspora are connected to the spirituality, yeah, traditional practices. So there's not like dance for entertainment's sake. There's dance that has a celebration connected to it, or a prayer connected to it, or a community connected to it, or a ceremony. It was very ceremonial. And so my time in Africa taught me like, oh, there's something beyond my words happening when I'm moving, you know, when the drums take over, when you're not thinking about technique, you're not thinking about a step, you're not thinking, you know what I mean? You're being encompassed into this like cosmic spiritual place, you know, of release and of freedom and of gratitude. There's the spiritual element that's, so it's very difficult to explain. I think like commercial dancers will say like, oh, you're going off, right? Like, you know, like you're going off, like you're not really here, you're here, you're dancing, but what you're putting into it, you're going off, you know. So that's healing too. You always feel better ending than how you started. That's what I have to remember.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think pretty much all dancers can relate to that. It's like you do feel it is healing. Yeah, and I think even if we were too young to realize that when we were cultivating that, it's like, that's what was happening. So you have to protect that.
Yeah. Oh,
cool.
that was what was happening.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I think we'll wrap it up there, but please share with us where people can find you, where people can find your book, and anything else that you do.
Yes. So my social media is Sakina_world, SAKINA_world. That is on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I'm most active on Instagram. I am a real person, so like feel free to engage, DM, message me. It fills me up when like people ask for advice, or you know, they want to really build authentic connection. So feel free to do so. You can also visit sakinaibrahim.com. That's where my books are available, as well as information about my workshops and private lessons and coaching, and you know, agent information, all that good stuff. I'm super grateful to, you know, be able to dance talk with you. It's not every day.
Yeah.
You get to dance talk, and you know, we're a special breed. So thank you so much for having me. You can also find To Begin on Amazon.com or BarnesandNobles.com. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.